Hello! In this lesson, we're gonna talk about getters and setters. We can say that getters and setters are special methods as static methods. But getters and setters help us to manipulate our properties and encapsulate them. So we use getters to get data from our object, and we use setters to define attributes, to define data in properties of our object. Let's create our first getter. To create a getter is simple. You just need to create a method with the same name of a property. So for instance, let's suppose that I want to create a getter for my age property to get informations about age property. So to create a getter for this property is simple. You just need to write the get keyword and create a method with the same name of a property here. So in this case, I want to create a getter to my age property. So I will create a age method. And every time that you create a getter, you need to return a data, a information, anything. All right? It's a rule in JavaScript. So here I can return my age property. And to use getters is really simple. To use getters, you just need to call your object dot your property in this way here as a variable. So when you create a getter to a property, and when you call this property, automatically this getter function is executed, right? So getter methods works like properties, works like variables inside objects, right? So here I can make a console.log victor.age in this way, right? And let's test our script now. And as you can see, we're gonna narrow here. Why? Because when you define a getter, you should define a setter too. It's a rule in JavaScript. So here, to create a setter is really simple. To create a setter, we can create it in the same way of getters. So here, I can write set keyword and the name of the property that I want to create a setter for it. So I want to create a setter for my age property. And a setter needs to receive a parameter. Every time that you create a setter, you need to create a parameter for this setter here. So I will call this parameter of age, and here I will make this dot age equals to age. So setters is used to define data, define the value of a property in this way. So in a setter, you don't need to return nothing, right? Now, let's test our code here. And now, let's test our code. And as you can see, we're gonna narrow here. Maximum call stack size accessed. And why it happens? It's simple. When you call this.age and you have a setter here, you call the setter. So every time that you access the age property in your object, in your class, you access the setter. This behavior makes your your script makes your setter function recursive in infinite loop. So to resolve this problem, what you need to do is simple. Every time that you want to work with getters and setters, you have to, inside the getters and setters, you can't have attributes with the same name. So here, inside my getter, I can't have this age attribute here as the name of the getter. So a good practice is put underscore here and here. It makes our getters and setters works nice. And now, when I run my code, as you can see, all right, nice. And when I try to access my setter, how to access a setter is simple. You call your object dot your setter. In the moment that you call your age attribute and pass a value to this attribute here, what happens is JavaScript automatically calls your setter for this attribute, for this age attribute, right? And this value here that you pass as data to your property is passed by parameter here in your setter, and you pass this data here to your age attribute here, right? So you work with getters and setters in this way, right? But you have more power with getters or setters because you can manipulate the return as you want. So here in my getter, if I want, I can manipulate this return. Here, instead I have this line here, I can have this full. And when I try to access my age attribute here, as here in this line, let's see what happened. And as you can see, we have full here. Because when I access my property here in this way, automatically JavaScript calls my getter. And inside my getter, I return full. So inside getters and setters, I can manipulate my information. I can encapsulate my attributes, my properties. So here, I can implement the logic that I want. So here, I can make if 1 equals to 1, return 1, else return 2, for instance. So I create a logic inside my age getter to return an age. So now when I call my age data here and I reload, as you can see, we have 1 here because 1 is equal 1. But if I change this comparison here, 1 isn't equal 2. So it is false. And now, as you can see, we have here 2. So the greater power of getters is that you can manipulate your information inside them, right? So here I will make a return this.age underscore. But you might be wondering, what is the advantage of using getters and setters? In fact, the great advantage is that you can manipulate the input and output of your object's data. This manipulating the integrity of thus manipulating the integrity of your software. So for instance, here in my software, in my script, I can pass the data that I want to my age property. So if I want, I can go here, victor.age, and pass any number here. For instance, 1000. And when I reload, and here I will make a console.log victor.age, and I will reload, and we have 100. But as you can see, there is no people with 100 in age, right? So it is a bad information to our software. All right? So to maintain the integrity of our software, we need to verify if the age is valid. So here inside our setter, we can make a verification. We can make if the age that the user passes is greater than 0 and age is less than 100. If it is true, I will define the age. If isn't, I will define a default age. For instance, 10, right? Now, let's test our setter. So here, I will pass 20. Let's test. As you can see, we have 20. But now, I will pass 5,000. And as you can see, we have the default value because this age here is invalid because we validate our age. We validate the input to our object. And this thing here, things like that, maintain the integrity of our software. So it is the big power of getters and setters. And in this lesson, you'll learn how to work with getters and setters. And I see you in the next lesson. Bye bye.